Hazelnut is somewhat unique in that the important cultivars in the world are selections from the local vegetation. They're not products of breeding programs until very recently. And so we're often talking about a choice between this cultivar 200 years old and that cultivar 200 years old and this other Turkish cultivar 200 years old. There's been very little genetic improvement until recently. Cultivars are clonally propagated, easily propagated from the suckers. Cultivars are self-incompatible, so you need pollinizers for a diverse array of materials in the neighborhood. They are wind-pollinated, and they flower in the winter. Public breeding programs were not initiated until the 1960s. And there is certainly an opportunity to produce and sell hazelnuts. There's also a real need for better cultivars to plant. The program at Oregon State University was started by my predecessor, Maxine Thompson, in 1969. She retired in 1986, and I was hired. I continued the program now for 36 years. It is the largest hazelnut breeding program in the world, bigger than all others combined. Our goal is to produce high-yielding cultivars for the branched kernel market that have resistance to eastern clover blight. It's a fungal pathogen important to us, but not really important to anybody else because it's a North American pathogen. We do use DNA markers in the program. I've been doing marker-assisted selection for EFB resistance since 1998. We've created a linkage map, and we've studied traits and investigated genetic diversity in various collections. We now have about a dozen genome sequences, that is the DNA sequence of several different cultivars and selections. So these are our people. Do I get a red dot somehow here? Okay, Becky, Mimi, there's our farm manager Kendall, graduate student Bree, grad student Brian, Dave Smith, who talked to you 3 years ago, and Jacob Snelling, our lab manager. So this is not just me, but it's a team of people creating these new varieties and generating new tools and information. The situation in Oregon has changed dramatically in the last 12 years. We were at about 11,000 or 12,000 hectares in 2009. And with the release of Jefferson from the OSU breeding program, the acreage started to take off. And now we have about 3 times the number of hectares as we did in 2009. So these cultivars have been readily received by our growers and planted and taken in by our handlers and sold around the world. Now, by tree age, I asked our extension specialist, Dave Lyman, for data, and he gladly provided it. There are a lot of trees that are young. So the total number of tons that you see in the FAO statistics is old. We have many acres of trees that are just starting to produce nuts. So by age, you've got some very young trees, some middle-aged trees, and some mature trees. The acreage or the production should increase dramatically in the coming years. The standard spacing in our older orchards is 6 by 6 meters. So of these new and maturing trees, 16,000 hectares, more or less, are planted at double density. Double density for us would be 3 by 6 meters. New orchards have been planted almost exclusively with OSU cultivars. Jefferson was the first to be rapidly planted by our growers, but after the in-shell market was taken care of, they switched to planting kernel types. And the kernel types include Danville, McDowell, Lester, and most recently, Polio. About 80% of the new orchards are irrigated. That's a big change from the historical situation where we planted and had almost intensively managed. That's also a function of the price being high relative to what it was more than 10 years ago. Oleo, McDonald, and Webster shown here are widely planned today for the Blanche kernel market. We had a big increase in planting of yam hill, but that seems to have faded now that newer and better varieties are available for the kernel market. And initially there was Jefferson for the inshell. These are the objectives of the breeding program. At the top is A, the Blanche kernel market. We want white kernels that meet the needs of the chocolate makers. And high yield, round shape, high percent kernel, early harvest, few defects, easy pellicle removal. We want the skin come off so we have a bright white kernel. Pre-falling, we use a lot of Turkish parentage, and we want cultivars that can be mechanically harvested, not picked from the tree like they do in Turkey. Precocious, or early entrance into bearing. We want our trees to start to produce nuts in year 3 or year 4, not later. And resistance to big bud mite. Resistance is quite common in corals that way. And on the bottom, we're dealing with eastern filbert blight, which is not a concern to you, but is essential for Oregon production. The fungus is not here, the fungus is not in Europe, the fungus is not in Turkey, but we place a high priority on resistance. The world market is about 93% for kernels and only 7% for large in-shell nuts. And Oregon has traditionally grown large nuts for the in-shell market, but that has been changing because the demand is for kernels, it's not for big pretty nuts. A premium is paid for Blanche kernels, and you see the Blanche ratings here at the top. The Blanche ratings of 1, 2, or 3 are desired, and a Blanche rating of 6 or 7 is not. So we kill seedlings that have ratings of 6 or 7, and we focus on the 1s, 2s, and 3s. I crack samples, personally, 100 nuts per tree, and kill many trees with too many defects. The defects include what's shown here. We have legs, moldy kernels, shriveled kernels, poorly filled nuts, twins, and kernels with black tips. I know that there's a lot of Tony di Giffoni planted in Italy. In Corvallis, we see 20 to 25% moldy kernels, and also a lot of wax in Tony di Giffoni. And certainly in southern Chile, I think the percentage of moldy kernels is about the same. The difference is if you dry the nuts down quickly, the mold does not grow. If the nuts fall on the orchard floor and it rains for 2 weeks, then you have a big problem. The mold is always there. It's inside the shell on the tree. So I think our selections from OSU have avoided the problem with kernel mold. The breeding process is a 17-year timeline from making the cross until releasing the cultivar. It's not a fast activity. But from the time of making the cross to the time of making the next cross, it's an 8-year breeding cycle. So we move through material really quickly, and we have collected material from around the world for use in breeding. There's my assistant Dave in the greenhouse. We make crosses, we germinate the seeds, we grow them in the greenhouse for the first year, and then we transplant them to the seedling box, 1 meter by 3 meters. And when they start to bear nuts, we start to evaluate. We propagate the best and establish replicated yield trials. So this is the second phase of testing, the replicated trials. Oops. Back. So every year we plant 1 or 2 new trials, including check cultivars. And when we publish release notices in Port Science, we include the data from these trials. It also includes tree size as well as kilos per tree. We use a lot of different material, some other species, but mostly Corylus avellana. And Corylus avellana has incredible amounts of genetic diversity. And what's illustrated in this slide is variation in husk length. So you've got things like Gasaway, Sacagawea, and Negrette with very short husks, all the way down to Tomboulle from Turkey, Bellevue Rouge from France, Atababa from Azerbaijan, with very long husks. We use all of this type of material in breeding we select for the free husking types. We do work with the USDA in Corvallis to collect and maintain our hazelnut collection. Breeding program metrics. Dave Smith was here 3 years ago at your first day for hazelnut. I'm here for your second hazelnut day. Every year we plant about 5,000 seedlings that represent about 50 different crosses. And so over time we've produced over 200,000 seedlings in the field to evaluate. Over 20 hectares of land that we occupy, and the research budget that is a challenge to keep the money coming in to keep the program going. But we've been quite successful. And to date, we've released 27 cultivars. And now I will describe some of the important ones that you have heard about or are considering planting here. Jefferson was released in 2009. It's for the in-shell market. Big, pretty nuts. Higher productivity than Barcelona, which is our standard. Upright growth habit, so it's easy to manage in an orchard. Our growers love the growth habit of the tree. It's only about 45% kernel compared to about 43% for Barcelona. The nut harvest date is about 3 days later than Barcelona, so that's not so good. It rains in the fall in Oregon, and we would prefer early maturity to harvest the nuts before the rain stops. It's a very attractive nut. It has EFB resistance, and it has very late female flowers. So in warm climates, it may not be pollinated. We include Theta as a pollinizer in our Jefferson orchards, and never have a problem with the flowers not being pollinated. But in warmer climates, it may be more challenging. Doris and Garland roasted some Doris kernels, and I encourage you to taste them at one of the booths nearby. Doris is suited for both the in-shell and kernel markets. It's a bit bigger kernel that many buyers want, but it really tastes good, and it blanches well. Outstanding flavor. It's on a small tree. And in the orchards I've been visiting in the last week, the tree size is about the same as Yaddo. So better suited for high-density orchards than many others. The nut harvest for us is with Barcelona. In Chile, it's 14 days early. That's a real advantage. Percent kernel is about like Barcelona. It's not really high. Resistant to EFB. Kernels larger, so they're 15 millimeters instead of 13. And from what I've seen 2 years ago, and this year it looks really good. Tonda Pacifica, we released because of its excellent kernel quality, and in fact had data returned to us from Ferrera's Quality Assurance Lab in Alba, Italy, that showed it was every bit as good as Tondage and Zelia Larvae, except it doesn't have the problems. Small size, beautiful blanched kernels, maturity 7 to 10 days earlier than Barcelona. The tree is a bit smaller than Barcelona, but produces as many nuts. drooping branches, so the growth habit is not great. The branches go down and out rather than up. So you have to prune it to keep it under control. A few defects: excellent blanching, excellent flavor. It is not planted in Oregon because it's susceptible to eastern fiddle blight. It was released for other countries. Possible sunburn, as I've seen in hot districts in Chile. In the Willamette Valley, we've never had a problem with it. In the hot districts in Chile, the leaves will burn and turn brown. In the south, the leaves burn a little bit and turn purple, but it doesn't seem to be a problem. Sacagawea, impossible for Chilenos to pronounce. But she's an important woman in American history. So bear with me. Saka, whatever you want to call her, she's a queen. She's a really good parent too. Sacagawea is a kernel type, with medium size, a little bit bigger than any buyers want. Very thin shells, 52% kernel, and a little fiber on the pellicle. So it's a beautiful raw kernel with almost no fiber. And you roast it, and the skin comes out easily. Nuts mature about 10 days before Barcelona. Similar yield per tree, higher kernel yield per tree, higher kernel yield efficiency. It's a globose tree. It's a round tree. If you want the sunlight to penetrate the tree, you need to remove some branches so that you get production throughout the tree. Otherwise, the center of the tree will have no nuts because it's dark. Quantitative resistance to eastern fiddle blight, not a concern for you. The parents, one parent's from Sicily, the other's from Catalonia. So both parents from hot, dry areas. It should perform well in hot, dry places based on parentage. The Yamhill is actually quite a bit planted in Chile now. Yamhill was our first serious release for the kernel market. The nuts are small, and for us, they're not exactly round. They're a little bit long. They're rounder in Chile than they are in Oregon. It's a low vigor tree compared to Barcelona, which is our champ. Spreading growth habits, it's a very unique growth habit that you need to manage as an orchard manager. Very high productivity per tree and per hectare. So that's the real benefit, that you can produce kernels in large numbers. Nuts start falling early, but they fall over an extended period of time rather than some other cultivars. They fall within a few days. The Yamhill tends to fall over a 2-week period or so. 49% kernel, that's not too bad. Very attractive raw kernels. Blanching is so-so in Oregon, but much better in Chile. We have seen that with heavy crop loads, that the nuts don't fill so well. So it's better to prune so that you have consistent high yields and a return crop. Excellent for hazelnut paste. I don't know exactly what percentage was sold to Ferrero Canada for making into Nutella, but I suspect it's a fairly high number, and they keep coming back for more. Webster, a more recent release, has a small nut size. It's an alternative to Yamhill. The kernels blanch better, and it's a more vigorous tree. So a small size, the tree is more vigorous than Yamhill. The nuts mature about 10 days before Barcelona. Few defects, 46% kernel, which is a little better than Barcelona, but not great. High nut yield, kernel yield, and yield efficiency. Good blanching flavor, and if the trees start to go into a biennial bearing habit, then prune in the odd year to bring them back to regular production. McDonald's is another recent release for the kernel market. The kernels are bigger, medium size, so some buyers are not so interested. The tree is moderate in size, smaller than Barcelona, but I don't kid you. Barcelona, you can find in all of our yield trials, it's the most vigorous tree. It's a meter taller than everything else in the trial. So that's our check. Nuts mature 14 days earlier, and because the tree opens as the nuts ripen, the sunlight gets throughout the canopy, and you have flower buds produced every year. 51% kernel, quite thin shells. High nut and kernel yield, good blanching, good flavor, and there are trees available in Chile now. Polio is the most recent release for the kernel market. Medium-sized tree. It's fairly vigorous compared to the others, and it has a growth habit that allows the sunlight to enter the canopy, so you don't have to prune so much. The nuts are down on the ground, ready to harvest 14 days early. That's a real advantage for us. 48% kernel, very few defects, high nut and kernel yield, good blanching, good flavor, and soon trees will be available in Chile. We have an agreement with our Chilean partners, the Garrison and Glen, part of Grupo Iguales. And the agreement is between Oregon State University, Oregon's hazelnut growers, and nurseries in other countries. That is, after release by OSU, we will give some starting material to a licensed nursery in other countries 2 years later, so they can plant witness trees. And then 4 years after release, they can start to sell trees commercially. That's because Oregon growers tax themselves to support research. In exchange for that, they get the first attempt, first possibility to plant trees. So please be patient. I think that's a realistic request to wait 4 years. So these are slides from Becky McCluskey's research trials, and I won't go through details, but whenever we publish a release notice, we include the data from the trials, and Becky on a couple occasions has presented at our International Congress on Hazelnut and results from previous trials. By the way, where will the next International Congress on Hazelnut be held? Corvallis, Oregon. Starting on Labor Day, the first Monday of September, and ending Friday noon, first week of September. And I really want hazelnut researchers from around the world to get together face to face. Damn COVID. It's really important to see our colleagues face to face. It's mostly for researchers, but we don't turn away others who are interested in research results. We have a website, you can easily find us and register and come. So kernel defects, so Santiam had a problem with mold, and that's why I didn't talk about Santiam today. Kernel size distribution, if you want big nuts, it's Jefferson and Doris. If you want medium-sized kernels, you have a set of choices. If you want smaller kernels, you've got Wester and Yamhill. I actually feel good as I travel around Chile too. You now in Chile have an assortment of cultivars, and whatever your buyers want, there's something on the list that meets their needs. These are different trees. I added a few photos so you're not just looking at nuts and kernels. The growth habits of Wester, McDonald, and Yamhill, with me serving as the meter stick, so you know how tall the trees are. This is a young orchard of Jefferson near Mount Angel, Oregon. And I include this to introduce you to Polly Owen. Polly was the manager of the hazelnut industry office for more than 20 years. And if you wonder, I know you wonder, where did that name Sacagawea come from? Where did the name Polly Owen come from? Polyoma. It's to honor her contributions to our industry. She's an amazing person. She's now retired. Every once in a while, she still gets pulled back in to do things. So, nuts and clusters of polio, our most recent release. Yam orchard, that's in the Casa Amor in Sorno. I spent some time with Becky taking photos of trees as we've extended our licensing to Europe. That letter and then we had to take photos of all kinds of stuff that we didn't have photos of. So we have a collection of different cultivars, we have a collection of trees of different species. Jefferson, upright growth, Sacagawea, more globose. Doris, a small spreading tree. In Chile, it looks a little different than Oregon. Webster is much like McDonald. McDonald on the left, Polyoma on the right. Average tree size for the recent releases is about 70% of Barcelona. It seems to be a good choice for most production systems. So the Pacifica, as you can see, the drooping growth habit, but excellent nuts and kernels. And hope I can go over time. Oh, 27 seconds over.